there, how are you all doing? I hope you're all doing well. Firstly, I am congested. I'm sorry, I have a cold, and it's that time where I'm gonna be congested, so it's just like double whammy, and I can't take anything because you saw the title, I'm pregnant. I still don't feel pregnant, with the exception of being ridiculously bloated, but I'm so used to being bloated anyway. I need to speak slower because talking at my normal speed is it's exhausting. This was an announcement I wanted to make. I did announce this recently over on my Instagram, so if you don't follow me there, then feel free. I mean, I don't post that often. I'm going to work on it this year. But if you want to see more from me, Instagram is where I posted it originally. I don't even know where to start. I did ask some questions on Instagram to people that had like questions they wanted me to answer in the video about being pregnant or like what's happened so far. So I'm going to answer a few of those questions in this video. But yeah, the basics. I am, as we speak, 17 weeks pregnant, which means that baby is the size of like an onion, like there. I don't really have a bump yet. I have, like my stomach has grown. A lot of it is still bloat though. So I haven't like popped. So I'm at like that weird phase where nothing quite fits right, but I don't really look pregnant enough unless I like really stick my stomach out. I want to preface this by saying my channel is not going to change. This is not going to be a baby channel. This is not going to be about children. The only thing I'm going to be doing on my channel is this video announcing everything. And I might make a video painting something for the baby, or doing some sort of craft for the baby, but this will not be, my channel will not change. I will not be constantly talking about being pregnant, because I know for so many people that can be quite triggering as well, because I know that there are so many people out there who struggle and still continue to struggle with fertility, and I know how hard it can be when you're trying and you see announcements and you see people talking about it and showing it and just like ramming it in your faces. So I completely understand if you need to not watch my channel for a while, but please know that I'm not going to be constantly talking about it. I'm not going to sit there with my bum out. I'm not going to be doing that, just out of respect for people, but also I don't want to use my child. People didn't subscribe to me for a baby. No, my children will not be shown online. I've always felt this way. Even when I started YouTube, I was like, if this ever goes anywhere, my children are never going to be online. But obviously, it's the internet. It's like leaving your front door open. You don't know who's going to find the channel, especially with AI, how bad it is. So yeah, we got married in April, and we knew that we wanted to start our family relatively quickly because I am just slightly over the age of 30 now. We want more than one child. We want maybe 2 or 3. So we were like, well, let's just see what happens. I have PCOS. I don't know how long it's going to take for my body to do that. So honestly, for the last 2 years, I had been tracking my like temperature every morning with like the Oura ring. So then that would sync up with like natural cycles, which would kind of tell me what my cycle was like. And it's calmed down a lot. In my mid to late 20s, it calmed down a huge amount. Like I cut out dairy quite a lot. I cut out some different things. I never thought it would happen for me. Like I didn't think my body could do it. I just for years and years had like convinced myself that it wasn't going to happen for me. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't in the cards for me. So I was very much like, yeah, well, you know, if someone asked if we wanted kids, I'd be like, yeah, maybe, you know, well, maybe one day, you know, if my body wants to, you know, that kind of thing. But I never really seriously thought it would ever happen. So to see that was the most surreal thing that I'd ever experienced. And it's a very funny story, actually, how I found out. We were in the UK to visit my grandma because she's been very, very poorly. She's not well at all. We've been back 3 times in the last year now. I knew that when we were over there, I was going to be at that point in my cycle where I could test to see if I was pregnant or not. You know, I'd had a few months before that where I'd been saying stark white tests and feeling really crap about it. So I didn't exactly have much hope that it was going to happen. The funny thing is, I brought over an ovulation test and I brought over like a strip pregnancy test. Did it, and I didn't expect anything because I have taken pregnancy tests obviously this year. So I did 2 of the tests. I had 2 of the like little cheap stick tests, and I went downstairs and I completely forgot about them. I came upstairs and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that test. Picked it up, rolled it over, and there was 2 solid lines on it, and I was like like, oh my gosh. I was like, And then I realized it was an ovulation test. So you have like two types of tests. You have like an ovulation test and then you have a pregnancy test. They look exactly the same. One is blue and one is red. And that's the only reason I knew it was an ovulation test, because it was blue. The thing with ovulation tests, if you don't know, no matter when you do it, it's always going to have two lines. But the only time you know that it's like positive is when the two lines are the same color, or the test line is darker than the control line. That's the only time it's like positive. But obviously a pregnancy test, it's positive only if there's a line, even if it's very, very faint. So because I did the two tests, so of course I picked up the ovulation test by accident first. And I'm like, oh, never mind. And I picked up the pregnancy test, like, here we go, it's gonna be blank. And I look at it and there's like a faint line. And I'm like, that's not real. That can't be real. I left it for half an hour. It's probably like an indent line, even though I've done a lot of these and it's never had an indent line ever before. And I'm like, no, it can't be. And I was shaking. I was like, no, that can't be right. And I remembered I had the early, 6 days before digital test. And because my husband was in the USA at the time where we live, he wasn't there with me. I didn't quite believe it, but in my gut, I was like, there's no way that's an indent, because even though it's faint, I have never had an indent. Even leaving a test for days, I've never had an indent on any test before. And it is a thing, don't get me wrong. You know, I know what they look like. And that was not it. So because we were in like a townhouse, which in the UK, townhouses have 3 floors, I was on the top floor, couldn't get Wi-Fi, couldn't call my husband. So I had to go downstairs to the ground floor. And I called him. This was honestly 4 a.m. for him, bless him. So he answers the phone like he was not with it whatsoever. And I was like, oh my God, I think it's positive. And he's like, what's positive? Because at the time, my grandparents had just come down with COVID, which terrible timing, unfortunately, but we had to stay away from them for 2 out of our 3 weeks of the holiday. But I showed him and he was like, I couldn't even see his reaction because it was pitch black in the room. He was completely out of it. I think it's positive. And I showed him, he was like, he said, I think that looks like a second line to me. And I'm holding it up in the light like this. And then my mum walks in the living room and she's like, are you okay? And I turned to her and I'm like, I think it's positive. This pregnancy test. And she looks at it and goes, I think that is a second line. I think it is. And I said, I need to go do a digital one. So I ran up the stairs and I took the digital, which takes 5 minutes to process. But I'm sat there with it flashing on my lap, turned over. And I'm talking to my husband on the phone. And I'm like, okay, I think it's done. And I turn it over and it says pregnant. And I'm like, I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about that whole experience because it was so surreal. You know, I was genuinely shocked because it was also very, very early. And I wasn't gonna be back in the USA to see my doctor for another 2 weeks, so I couldn't have any of my levels tested. I'm like, I've got to keep using these stupid progesterone suppositories. I had to use them for 12 weeks. And then I went downstairs and I showed my mum the digital one that said pregnant. She looked at me and just burst out crying. And I have the cutest video of me and my brother. He's 16, so there's quite a big age gap between us, but he's been talking about being an uncle for so long now. He's always said to me I'm gonna be the cool uncle, right? I'm gonna be the cool uncle, right? And then my other brother was also just his eyes burst out of his head. When my husband came over, we told his family, we told my dad over the phone as well. My husband was stuck in the USA for 2 extra days because they cancelled his flight twice. So that sucked, because I just wanted to see him and hug him and be celebrate, but I couldn't celebrate with him for a week. It was so frustrating. The only other people I told my best friend. Because I was in the UK, the silver lining of that situation was I was able to tell my grandparents face to face. It was very surreal that I got to tell them. My husband, for the rest of the day, kept texting me from work. He's like, I can't believe it. I'm so excited. I can't believe it happened. I can't believe it. I told you so. I told you it was going to happen. I can't believe it. My channel going forward, this is what has always made me very nervous. I am very, very fortunate that I have a core group of really solid, beautiful friends who are also YouTubers who do this full time. Mira, Mariah, and Ray. They're my best friends here on the platform. All 3 of them are married. 2 of them have children. So Mariah has 2, Mira has 2. And I was kind of able to ask them questions about how do you balance it? How do you do it? And I remember when I went to visit Mariah in 2022, and this was before she had her second child, but she told me that her schedule actually got better because she knew that she had this amount of time in the day to do those things, and it kind of helped her get weeks and weeks ahead of her content, and that I really, really admired. And then my friend Mira, she had twins. Like, I can't even imagine twins, and she still to this day has her own business, YouTube. She's incredible. But she kind of told me the same thing. She sort of found a routine and like a schedule that like she knew she had this amount of time to work in. So I'm hoping that's what happens with me, because I've always worked best under pressure. If I've got like this amount of time to do stuff and I have a lot to do, usually I'll get it done if it's like my last amount of time to get it done. I've always sort of struggled with the idea of like not having maternity leave. Because, I mean, in the US, I think it's standard at most to get like 6 to 8 weeks. Other companies obviously offer more, but the maternity leave in the USA is just completely abysmal. However, in the line of work that I have here on YouTube, my business, everything that I do, it's solely reliant on me. Like, no one can come be in my place and film my videos for me. You know, I have to do that. I can have help with editing, I can have help packaging my products, but I'm the only person that can be me. Above all, what I'm going to do is try my best to film 2 videos every single week until 3 weeks before my due date, but only release 1 video a week every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time, if you don't know what it is. That's the plan. Release 1 video a week, but try and film 2. So by that point, hopefully it should take me towards like November of this year. I'm hoping to get a solid like 4 to 5 months off, but obviously I could just say I'm not going to upload for a while, you know, that's whatever. But if I do that, then my channel will die. People will stop watching me, they'll lose interest, and it will be hard to recover from that. So I want to stay consistent, but I also know how precious children are and how quickly they do grow up, and I want to revel in that time as much as I humanly can. I think Patreon will help sort of give me less anxiety over everything, knowing that I have something sort of stable there. I'm going to be setting up my Patreon. I'd love to know if you'd like to see anything specific from there. I'm thinking like a Zoom call once a month, maybe like a preview of videos before they go live. If you would like to support me on Patreon, I'll leave a link in the description. There's no pressure, of course. I'm taking my brother on like full time to edit for me this year, so hopefully that'll take a lot of time away from me and I'll have more time to film. But yeah, that's sort of the plan for the channel. Is everything's gonna stay the same. I have like 40 or 50 videos planned for this year so far, but if there's something in particular you want to see, let me know in the comments. The government especially does not help self-employed people. Like, if you are self-employed, you're on your own, buddy, you know? You've got no one looking out for you. Someone asked, will I be doing a mural for the baby room? I would love to. I really would love to, but I don't have a baby room yet. So basically right now, my husband and I live in the in-law suite of the house my parents are renting. That might sound strange. So basically what happened is my parents and I both sold our homes 2023. My parents then rented this house. This was filled with boxes before, like my boxes and their boxes, but they rented this house. My husband and I rented about half an hour from here. And we were supposed to be sort of deciding where we'd want to move. Do we want to move out of state? Do we want to, where do we want to move? You know, we've moved so many times. Like, my dad's job has taken us all over the place. That I personally, and obviously my parents too, we want to be settled somewhere. So we want to find somewhere, and that's where we're staying forever. Like, we don't want to move again. A couple months after we moved, we found out my grandma was gravely, gravely ill. We've been back to see her 3 times now. We've been like researching a lot of areas and trying to find different places that would work for us as, you know, a family. And also my husband, his job is not one that he can work from home with. He has to be out working. So even though I can move pretty much anywhere, it's very dependent on where he can find work as well. And we've got our eyes on a couple of different places, but our lease ended on where we were renting in June of 2024. And instead of extending our lease for another year, my parents, who are renting this house right now, they're lucky they can kind of rent it every 2 months if they want to. So we're like, yeah, let's move in with my parents for a couple of months, because we don't want to extend the lease for another year, be stuck there for another year. It's only gonna be for a couple of months. We still don't know where we're going. And then I found out I was pregnant, obviously. You know, I am established with a bunch of really good doctors here. I have to have a lot of doctors. Unfortunately, I'm not an easy pregnancy. I am a high-risk pregnancy. I'll get into that in a little bit, but I'm established with a lot of doctors, and we don't really know. We don't really know if it would be... I would rather have a house, have a nursery set up, but I also don't want to rush into buying something if, you know, we were kind of waiting to see what happened with the election and like everything. We just wanted to see what was going to happen, how the housing market's ridiculous right now. So we're just still in this kind of limbo of not really knowing. Now we're like, do we move before I have the baby? Do we move after? We could stay here. I am established with a bunch of doctors, which is really, really nice. Don't have a lot of room. We're in like an in-law suite. We don't have a lot of room. I work and sleep and live in this area, and it's not really big enough, but it is only temporary, which we keep telling ourselves that. We just don't want to like rent somewhere for an entire year because, you know, if you break a lease, it's so expensive. Most of our stuff is in a pod, like storage in a pod that is waiting to be moved somewhere, and we just still don't know where that's going to be. Yeah, we're kind of undecided because obviously I don't want to move heavily pregnant and then have to find all the doctors again. But also, do I want to waste my maternity leave I worked really hard for moving with a little baby, you know? So we're kind of like, you know, we're going to see if any jobs pop up for my husband, maybe in this one area we're looking at, but we'll see. How's my pregnancy been going so far? So symptom-wise, it's great. Unfortunately, I am a high-risk pregnancy. I have this very weird, rare condition called ITP, which basically means my platelets are low. I think they're supposed to be between 120,000 and like 400,000, I believe. Basically, your platelets help with like the clotting. So if you cut yourself, you're not going to bleed out. Because I have low platelets, it's easier for me to bleed out with things. But not only are my platelets low, they've been chronically low since I was 13, but the size of the platelets are high. It was this whole thing I went through when I was like 13 years old. I went to the children's hospital about it. And it's when you're pregnant, your platelets naturally drop anyway. In order to get an epidural, your platelets need to be at least 80,000 at this specific hospital. And obviously to have a C-section, if you need one, you have to have an epidural. But my platelets like to hang out around 60 to 85,000. Pretty much all the time. And on a daily basis, this doesn't really affect me. And she told me like, yeah, to have an epidural, your platelets need to be 80,000. You need to have an epidural to have a C-section. If they're not at this level, they would have to literally put me out cold for hours, and I wouldn't even get to meet my baby right away. They told me that I can be put on steroids closer to the end of my pregnancy, which I really personally don't want to do. But if I get really puffy in a few months' time, you know why. But also I think they can give me a platelet transfusion, which personally I would prefer. In an ideal world, yeah, great, I'll do it without pain relief, you know, but it's nice to at least know the options there. So to be told like, yeah, you're pretty much not going to get an epidural, it's like, I'm like, oh, that's great, great for me. At least I don't even have the option. But one thing I would like to do is at least make art for the nursery. If I can, if I won't have a nursery to make a mural with right away, I'd love to at least make some artwork in advance because I think that would be quite nice. Another question was, are you scared the tiny child will get into your art supplies? No, I'm not worried about this because I use the Dreambox, which has like a bunch of drawers. Nothing is low down. I just need to be very careful to make sure once I'm done filming, everything is away and that door is shut. You know, I would hate for the baby to get into anything. But now you know why I didn't finish the Disney castle. Like, if you watch that video, people keep asking me to this day, like, why are you not doing the part 2 you said you were gonna do? Because I found out I was pregnant and I can't use the E6000 glue. It's very dangerous. I can't use it. So I was using a mixture of like non-toxic glue and the E6000 because the non-toxic glue really was just not strong enough to hold it all. So I was kind of using a mixture of both, and I will not touch that stuff whilst I'm pregnant. This is a big one. Are you considering raising your kids in the UK at some point? I could honestly make a whole video about this. I honestly could. There are pros and cons to living in the US, and there are pros and cons to living in the UK. I feel this sense of sadness every time I go back to the UK. It's like, it's my home, but I've been gone for so long that it's like it's not my home anymore. Every time I go back to the UK, there's like this almost level of like safety and peace that I feel. And like where I live now versus where I grew up in the UK, it's like comparing apples to oranges because I lived in the countryside where people are pretty friendly, you know, drivers drive nicely, but here I live like in the suburbs of a big city. So I can't really compare here to where I used to live in the UK. However, I've lived in 4 states now. I've lived in 2 different states in the Northeast. I've lived in the Southeast and I have lived in the Northwest. The only places I haven't lived are the Midwest and the Southwest. I've lived in the USA for 2 decades now, and I've obviously lived in the UK as well. So I think that I could probably talk on this subject better than probably 98% of people, life is more important than business, which in America, it feels the opposite. Like my husband, if he's lucky, will get 2 weeks vacation time at a full-time job here. But if we move to the UK, he'd get like 5 weeks by default. And it makes me sad to think that that would be our life. My husband would get 2 weeks off a year. That's what bothers me more than anything, to know that if we did live in the UK, he could have weeks off. Right now, I've just upgraded my health insurance because obviously being pregnant and having a baby in America is very expensive. So right now, my maximum I'm gonna pay for the entire year will be only $6,000. And that's after I'm paying nearly $700 a month for my health insurance. Before now, it was like $450 a month. I had an endoscopy a couple years ago. It was $4,000 with insurance. So, obviously I'm going to have a lot of appointments here and there. No, I'd have an ultrasound. There's $100. Have another ultrasound. There's another $100. I was briefly considering having the baby in the UK, but I think logistically it would be too difficult because obviously my husband works here in America. He can't get 2 months off. I can't travel like really close to my due date. I don't have doctors there. So unfortunately, it's just not really going to work out that way. I like in the UK that the midwife comes to you as well. Like you don't have to take your baby out to appointments. The midwife comes to you and you don't have to take the baby out. Yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of pros to the UK, but there's also a lot of cons too. And the last question is, did you consider pulling a Mariah Elizabeth and not telling anybody until after? I did, but then I was like, okay, but if I start feeling really unwell during my pregnancy and I'm not able to upload something, or like I already have pregnancy brain, I'm not like saying things correctly, I'm kind of forgetting things in videos and people are noticing. I also don't think I'm going to do a very good job of not telling people because I'm excited. I don't know, I also wanted it to tell people so they sort of have a bit more understanding of if I'm like, I'm really, really tired this week, I haven't finished what I've done. Mariah did a stellar job. She honestly did such a stellar job of keeping up with everything. I honestly don't know how she did it because it's very, very impressive. But yeah, that is it for today. This was a long video. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope that this was informative. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I will be hanging out in the comments for a while, replying to your questions and stuff like that. Any questions you have, absolutely let me know in the comments. But yeah, for now, thank you so incredibly much for watching this video. Happy New Year! Thank you for all your support. I'm definitely gonna need it this year because there might be times where I'm not like on top of things, but I'm gonna try. But yes, for now, thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and I will see you in the next video.